Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Holistic Health Podcast. I was going to say the Holistic Health Pod, but who am I to be shortening the name really after all this time? Um, Today's episode has come about because recently, I mean, this is a topic I've been asked about several times in the past, but there's just been an influx of people in my DMs lately asking a bunch of questions around becoming a naturopath or how did I learn what I've learned. And I selfishly thought that it would just be easiest to just answer this once and for all in one podcast episode so that anyone who's curious, which I totally get, because before I was studying, I had very similar questions to some of these that, we could both just answer openly and honestly. And we have had different journeys in as well. So that might even be helpful to just have two different perspectives along the way as well. So apologies if some of you are 0% interested in this, although if you are, I assume you haven't clicked on this episode. And for those of you who are, if there's any other extra questions that you have, let either of us know. But otherwise, shall we dive into question numero uno?
Yes, let's dive into question numero uno. So, the first question we have is where did we study and how did we find it? And as Nat said, we have had very different journeys to each other. So, I might get you to start off, Nat, with where you studied and how you found it.
Yes. Okay. So for those of you who don't know my background, I actually started by studying a Bachelor of Nutrition and Dietetics at Wollongong University many, many, many moons ago. And so that was to become a nutritionist and a dietitian. So I did that first. I found it great at the time. That's what I wanted to be doing. I felt like it was really well taught for the majority of it until we got to the part about how to actually manage chronic conditions, which is why I ended up studying naturopathy. But anyway, I digress. So I studied there first, and then I was practicing for a while. I already knew that I wanted to learn more in terms of I wanted to be able to practice naturopathic medicine and herbal medicine, but I didn't. I couldn't straight away do that next degree because I just financially couldn't afford to, time-wise couldn't afford to. I wasn't super well at the time either. But eventually I started studying naturopathy again. It took me a really long time to get the naturopathy degree because I did it very slowly, as in I did it 1 to 2 subjects at a time. I didn't have to do the whole degree because I got like probably almost half of it credited to recognise prior learning or industry experience, but the other half that I did have to do took me several years, probably like 5 to 7 years to be honest, to get done. I did defer, I think, at some point in amongst there when everything was just hectic in my life, but yeah, that was my second degree. How did I find that? Look, I think that I found it, like, some of it was a bit of repetition and stuff that I already knew. Some of it was new information. I think my experience was it very much depended on the lecturer or the tutor or the supervisor that I had per the subject as to how much I felt like I learned practically, which is really what I was interested in. But overall, I mean, I can't complain about my experience. I feel like, generally speaking, it was good. There are definitely things that were missed, but not missed in the sense that they intentionally chose to step over them, but just missed in the sense that you can't learn everything that you need to learn for the career, even in 1 degree or even in 2 degrees. There's part of it that you just learn, through experience or through seeking out further learning, which we'll come into with some further questions. But yeah, and who I studied the naturopathy degree through was, initially it was called ACNT, and then I went over to Torrens, or I don't know if they renamed themselves or if it ACNT dissipated and then it turned into Torrens. I don't know. All I know is originally ACNT and finished the degree with Torrens. And no, like, that choice was not made on anything other than what was most accessible to me at the time based on location and recognized prior learning and a few other factors. It wasn't to do with me thinking, overall one particular college was better than the other. It was more, that decision was more based in my life circumstances and my unique situation over anything else. And I'm sharing that because I know sometimes it can feel like maybe that decision was made because I thought Torrens was better than Endeavour or like somewhere else that's popular to study in Australia. But it, you know, for all, I don't know what's true out of those two, but I just know that the decision for me was made based on logistics.
Fair enough too. And I think
Yeah.
many of those factors come into choosing like where you're going to study.
Mm.
For me, my journey was a little bit different. So I studied in New Zealand, which doesn't help anybody here listening on how they get started unless you really want to fly there. And to be fair, if I had my time over and the money, I would have actually flown to the US and studied at Bastia University to become a naturopathic doctor. The training, there's varying degrees of training across the field of naturopathy, and depending which country you study in, and even which college you study at, actually, like having lectured at most of the colleges here in Australia. Disappointingly, there isn't a standard national framework there, but we'll talk about that later in the episode. But when I studied, so I studied naturopathy and herbal medicine and nutrition like straight out of high school. So I was in a really lucky and unique position to, well, I realized what I wanted to be really young. I actually, it's a bit of a funny story. I was really into health, I was really into sports, I was really into science, I was really into maths, and I was fascinated by how things worked, like on this planet and off the planet. And I was fascinated with outer space and was actually en route to become an astronaut. I'd enrolled in the NASA Youth Space Camp program, and I was doing calculus, biology, chemistry, physics. Sports science was my elective. But in my spare time, like I read everything I could get my hands on about nutrition, vitamins, essential oils, yoga, and I just didn't even know there was such thing as a naturopath. And then at 17, in my last year of high school, I saw an ad that listed literally everything I was passionate about, interested in, like really was, to be honest. There are sort of clues in my background as a child that I was always going to be in the healing arts. That's a story for another time. But it meant when I saw this ad that I realized that this is what I was. And I also, at the time, was getting very bored by physics fundamentals and was like,
That's
oh,
fair.
yeah, I'm like, I have to be better than America's male best to be successful and go to space, which I was confident I could if I wanted to work my ass off. But I realized that I would be sacrificing my life really for the potential to go to space. And I realized it wouldn't be worth it for me personally. And also, it was like a light bulb went off when I saw the ad. And what I signed up for at the time was an advanced diploma in naturopathy and a diploma in botanical medicine and Western herbal medicine. Nutrition, certainly at the time, was incorporated in the naturopathic diploma, and it was the first year they offered the Bachelor of Health Science or a degree option, and the option that I got was complementary medicine. So I did the extra 4 papers via correspondence. That was actually through Charles Sturt University over here in Australia at the time. It was obviously an agreement, a Trans-Tasman agreement. And I must admit, like when I did that, I remember thinking, wow, like how can anyone practice without doing this?
Mm.
I did, there was 2 pathophysiology subjects, nutritional biochemistry, and then my elective was behavioral neuroscience. And it was just really, yeah, really empowering stuff. And as of 2018, it's now a requirement that if you're going into study from that time onwards, that you are going to be degree qualified. And I think that's probably was long overdue, to be honest. I'm really glad that's the standard now. That being said, as you'll find out later in our chat, the training that you do wherever you decide to do it and whatever you decide to do is really the equivalent educational equivalent of kindergarten. And you do most of your learning like once you've graduated and you're in practice and doing postgrad studies and literally applying it. So please know everyone comes out of it feeling ill prepared. I would love it if there was a bit more like internship, mentorship, and business studies built into our qualifications, like there is in the US. There's a lot more supervision, like more like hospital supervision. And I think that would probably help people step into practice with a little more confidence. And skills. But again, this is, I guess, a professional challenge that we all have.
Mhm.
So that's my journey. And I was very young. So like I said, 17, I realized, oh, being naturopath, that's like what I was born to do. And then I started studying at 19. At the time, there weren't really any prerequisites to get in. You just had to really have a solid understanding of like maths and science. But essentially, if you paid the money, you could get in. I'm not sure what it's like now. Probably not too dissimilar. You're not going to waste that money if you're not sure you're going to be able to actually do the study. But yeah, it was really nice to go into it so young. At the time, it was a second career for pretty much everyone else that came in to do the study. So for me, I felt very blessed to be on my path from the very, very beginning. But of course, on the path of being a practitioner is so much more than just getting that piece of paper and then stepping into practice. And one thing that we do get asked a lot about, and I think, differentiates some practitioners from others, is functional testing. So learning how to interpret blood tests, and in particular using a functional and naturopathic lens. So now I'm curious, did they teach you this when you were in uni, or did you learn it after, or a bit of both?
Yeah, no, I definitely didn't learn it in either degree. I taught myself and also got mentoring around it outside of uni. So I learned a lot of it between doing the dietetics, nutrition and dietetics degree, and then doing the naturopathy degree. So I would say I've learnt the most in that time in between because I was just highly motivated at that time. And I had some phenomenal mentors at the time, just really generous people who, one in particular, Katie, her name is, I was going to say was, but she's still here, she's still around, Katie Weeks, and she's now head of a education and supplement company in the education department. But she was just really generous with her time and teach me a lot about a lot of the key functional medicine testing labs that were around at the time and are still around now but have evolved. I also learnt so much from other really well-known practitioners in our industry that have a big foot in the door of practitioner education. So like Rachel Arthur, Rhiannon Hardingham, these are both two people I've learned a lot from in terms of since beginning my career. And then a lot of it I have also learnt over time myself in terms of, attending different seminars or webinars or seeking out additional trainings, learnt in a way from observation of clients and then asking questions of people that know more than me. I would say they're the key ways that I have learnt extra stuff. And, you also can, once you're out in practice, you can get help and support and education on how to interpret a lot of the functional labs by the labs that offer the tests themselves. But I would say with that I think it's really important to not have that be your only education, because it can create blind spots in realizing what tests are and aren't worth it or are and aren't appropriate for each individual. I think it's really good to have a really solid understanding of just how much gold you can gather from simple, humble blood testing before you're going down the functional medicine testing path. And it's my personal integrity belief that you should really understand how to interpret a functional lab before you start ordering it for patients, or at least have someone lined up to help mentor you through that interpretation, because patients are spending hundreds of dollars on functional testing when they're doing it. And if you can't make that money worth it for them, it's really, it's just not very in integrity, in my opinion. And that's not to say you need to be the top expert at interpreting that, but you need to have an idea of why you're ordering it, how to take away from it what you need for that patient, and or also someone that you can trust to support you interpreting that if you need it. And again, that's where mentoring, I think, is so important in this industry, whether it's group mentoring or individual mentoring. But again, being just discerning with who you choose, and being consistent with continuing to learn, because the reality is there's more information all of the time. There's new tests all of the time. There's new nuances all of the time. And you just have to stay open and humble to that as well. So I think that's where I've learnt most of mine. What about you? Is it similar, or some other spaces and places you've learnt?
Yeah, I'm actually struggling to recall what we covered in college, to be honest. It was like 24 years ago now. How am I old enough to even say that? But I must have learnt the basics. But of course, as you mentioned, things are always evolving. We know reference ranges aren't based on health. We know they're not based on a national standard either, or even, a statewide standard. They are forever shifting and changing based on the demographic. And they're really based on disease diagnosis rather than what's optimal. And so that's the space that, as practitioners who work in the functional and root cause medicine space, what we're looking for. We're trying to see subtle changes and actually ensuring you stay in the Goldilocks zone rather than on the runway to something that's going to cause you problems down the line, and always looking for the reasons why. I would say I've learned the majority of what I utilize in practice now has been postgraduate studies. So similar to you, Nat, yes, labs often run, functional labs often run testing. I've learnt from, key opinion leaders in certain areas. So this is probably something that is always going to be a work in progress. For example, you've got the thyroid reference ranges on paper, then you've got the functional ranges, and then if you're working in that space, you're going to start to see more and more subtle shifts in how you match that with your patient and making decisions based off that. And of course, the story that it tells. But like you said, Nat, there is so much you can tell from basic bloods, like so much more than you would ever think, which really reduces the requirement for functional medicine testing quite significantly. And given that it is costly, as much as I think more information is great, if it's not going to change the way you're going to proceed, sometimes deferring those things can be wise, or you can consider them, if a response isn't achieved with your initial protocol outset. But I agree, it's a responsibility that we need to take very seriously as practitioners, because we all have, well, most of us have a finite well of resources to draw from, and I would much rather people invest in improving their environment or in treatment than just endless data gathering that may not influence that. So rest assured, this is something that you will always be refining and honing through time. And so you'll no doubt create your own sort of little black book of reference ranges and your own notes that you'll build upon. And, and if you're lucky, you'll have mentors who've walked the path to support you. And then eventually you'll become one yourself.
Yeah. And yeah, yeah, totally. And the other question that was asked of me as well a couple of times was, were there many people in my degree, I assuming meaning the second degree, the naturopathy degree, that were doing it as quote unquote mature age students? And I know you already answered this for yourself in your first answer, but for me, there was a mixed bag. Like, there were definitely several people there, including myself, where it wasn't their first degree. In fact, I'd say most people, they'd studied something previously. There were a couple of people where it was their first degree, and it just wasn't a thing. It's not, I don't feel like it was a massive problem, or I would say if you're someone who is quote unquote mature aged in terms of study wise, I wouldn't let that put you off. If you've got passion for it, if you're, interested in, if you're driven, it doesn't like it honestly doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. If anything, like I think there are pros and cons to doing it early versus doing it later, and I just wouldn't let it be a deal breaker. Um, the question that was tied into that as well was also for me around someone asked, did I feel like I was learning stuff I already knew because I was doing it as a second health degree? So, yes, I did at times, many, many, many times, feel like I was learning stuff that I already knew. But I also went in with the mindset of, I'm here to learn, I'm here to see how different people do things. I'm coming in with an open mind. I'm trying to refresh my memory on some things that I haven't touched in ages because there's a lot that you just don't need at times when you're practicing that is important to the fundamentals, but you just end up losing it in terms of being able to readily recall it. So my answer is yes, and also I still learnt new things, and I think part of that was also having an attitude of wanting to learn new things, of being open to be learning new things, as opposed to going into it, which I did witness in my degree, going into it with, a bit too much confidence or being closed off and thinking I knew everything and that I was just here to get a piece of paper and finalize things. Like that personally wasn't my attitude. And I still think that there's always more to learn. And I think if you can continue to carry that attitude, it definitely serves you. Um, the other, I know those questions are quite specific to my journey, so maybe let's just jump to the next one so we can get through them all. This might also be partly a question for me, but you can answer this too because you've done other degrees or other like certificates while working. But the next question is it doable working full time or part time and studying? And actually, you go first. What do you think? Because I know you have done, you've worked and you've been studying other further things at times. So, what's your answer to that?
So when I trained originally, it was full time, and in New Zealand, full time uni was literally like 9 till 5, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and like late night Thursday night. So it was challenging to do that and then work part time on top of that. I think for most of the students in my class were mature age students. It was a second career, and I think in some ways it was easier for them because they were financially established and didn't have to do that. So there's probably, and there was a lot of benefits to being, mature and established and having other skills. But I think for some of them, becoming a student again was a little bit challenging. It's a different part of your brain, right? I found it fine at the time, but I was 19, 20, 21. I had energy to burn. Since then, having done other study part-time, like in the building biology space, for instance, you have to be very disciplined with your time and actually be very, what's the word I'm looking for? Realistic with your capacity as well, and be really organized with your planning. I definitely think it could be done. I wouldn't let any of that put you off from doing it. I have to say, like with all the mature age students in my class, they were so happy to be doing something new and something that they were passionate about and something that gave them a new future. So I don't think no matter where you're at age wise or career wise, it's ever bad to actually try something new and do something that means a lot to you. Because if you're passionate about it, it's way easier than trying to study something not that excited about. But you definitely do want that. And I do think, these days the study, it's a lot more flexible, which is nice. There's a lot more correspondence options. There are just so many other, I guess, pathways to achieving the outcome and the qualifications that you want that I think you can absolutely make it work for you. So yeah, I would just say go for it.
Yeah. Well, I concur. I think that's a great answer, and I'd agree. And the other questions were maybe we'll loop these two together in one because well, not that they're specifically related, but someone asked, did you find it stressful or hard? I would say, yeah, like it's studying is hard and stressful at times.
Mm.
But again, I don't feel like that's necessarily a reason not to do it, or we'd never do things in life that are important, because a lot of things that are stressful and hard are also worth it. I think it's more what Amie said before about just knowing your capacity, maybe choosing your timing as best you can, and just to a degree surrendering to the fact that there will be parts of it that are hard, that are stressful, but that it's not going to be the whole thing. And also there's an ending to that. It's not like you're signing up for the rest of your life to be like that. So that's my very blunt answer to that. And the other question was around, have you burnt out in your career? And I would say I haven't. Like, I would say I've definitely gone through several times where I felt really, really at my capacity and relatively overwhelmed. And also, I wouldn't say that I've had like the rug completely taken out from under me purely based on my career. But I also will be completely honest in saying that I did hustle, for lack of a better term, pretty friggin' hard for a good number of years to get to where I am. And I don't know whether I would I be here without doing that. Quite possibly. There might have been a smarter way to go about it, but I won't be dishonest in saying that, yeah, I was completely balanced and I got here when I got here. I really did sacrifice a lot in those early years to build my business. I worked really hard. I said no to things. I prioritized money to certain places that were going to help me progress my career, and it has paid off for me. And also, that would I put myself through that again? No. I'm really glad that's done, but at the same time I don't regret it because I feel like it got me to where I am.
Yeah, amazing. I think I have a maybe almost a reverse answer. Like I found study really easily because A, I was young, full of energy. I was so excited to be studying something that I just absolutely loved and dreamed about and had already been reading about. So my nickname at uni was Tin Ass because for the most part things came quite easily. That being said, it was more I was great at exams, I had a really good memory. When it came to actually having to like write essays and things like that, oh, I just wanted to pretzel up and die. So that just wasn't intriguing to me. Like I found that just so boring. But for the most part, the study part was easy for me. I just was absolutely woke up every day pinching myself with how exciting it was to learn. I feel like I had the most incredible array of teachers who were also very passionate and very learned, and it was just a magical time. But in terms of like starting my business, I've had various iterations. I've moved around a lot. I've had some part time roles with other companies or doing things. So I've dipped in and out of being full time practitioner to, part time or two-thirds of the time. And what I will say is, and it's very different now, but like now there's so many young people going into naturopathy and there's so many mentors to learn from. It's a really mainstream profession now, but back when I did it, there weren't many people doing it, and you basically had to like bush bash your way through. Like you were like brand new, discovering everything again, and creating all the resources. And this is just, I mean, I want to say pre-internet days because dial-up just shouldn't count as internet. But like manually like typing up, handouts and printing them out and having a file. And like I found the admin side of business incredibly tedious, and still do, to be fair. But thankfully with AI and the internet, there's a lot less effort that goes into that these days. But it is definitely something I would encourage anyone looking to do this to actually, like, if you can afford to invest in a mentor and invest in things that'll actually help you leapfrog forward quicker. If that had been an option for me, I absolutely would have done that, because I guess I took the slow, hard way round. And in more recent years, I've benefited from investing in programs and communities and trainings that have allowed me to quantum leap to my next level.
I love that. Yeah, and the other questions, I'm just going to skip over one of them because of time, but we'll circle back if we get extra time. So, another question that's really common is how long did it take you to build your practice? So, for me personally, I worked part-time from like for about, so what was it? It would have been 4 years. I worked part-time in a health food shop, or I also worked for I Quit Sugar and I worked for Bioceuticals, which is a where Amie and I met, a practitioner supplement and education company. So I worked part time in all of those spaces, not at the same time, at various times for the first 4 years or so, maybe 3 to 4 years of my career. And then I got to a point where it was basically like either I jump in full time into business and therefore there's enough space for it to grow, or I stay where I am and I just don't have the capacity to grow anymore. So I leaped at that point, and ever since then, I've been lucky enough, or I shouldn't say lucky, I've worked my ass off. Like, I've um, been in a position where it is my full time job and sustains me financially since then. So, and I would say it wasn't until about 4 to 5 years in where I could genuinely say, yeah, this is steady now, as opposed to really up and down and really unpredictable. And it was enough money and enough clients in order to sustain me. Plenty of people like do things faster than I did. Some people it's slower, but that was my personal journey of kind of how long it took me. And I would say a big step in the right direction for me, or a big turning point, was investing in a business coach. Shout out to my OG business coach, Ellie Swift, who is still a phenomenal business coach now. I've had a couple of other ones since then too. But I really noticed a big difference at that time, partly because I was ready, partly because I had great mentorship. And yeah, that's my side of it. What about you?
Well, because I've moved a bit, I have, shut down my clinic in New Zealand, and then I moved over here, and then I moved to the UK, and then I came back, and then I was working pretty extensively for bioceuticals for a while and just seeing patients casually. But I'm just reflecting back on when I first started it, because that's probably the most true representation, and it's very similar to what you described. I worked part time in a health shop, got headhunted by a local clinic down the road whose, patients were coming to shop in my health shop and going back and sort of talking about me, which was really nice. And then I ended up setting up my own business from there and built that steadily over probably, I don't know, I would say 1 to 2 years. And I was fortunate enough that, my partner at the time owned a house and we put the clinic on the back. So I didn't have overheads per se to kind of, put that extra pressure on. So, working in a health shop's a great way to learn very quickly and to have income. And I think almost every practitioner will, or graduate will need some kind of part-time income as they get going. And if you can choose something that supports your learning and the growth in your business, like a health shop, I have to say it's one of the best things that I ever did.
Yeah, I actually also would add to that working for a supplement and education company was a really fast track way for me to learn as well. I feel like I got thrown in the deep end, but I learned so much at that job, purely because I had to, especially being part of the practitioner support team and education. It was kind of like you need to know all of the things and you need to learn them quick, smart. I also would say a lot of my connections in the industry began there, and there's still so many of them that I have now. And I do think that really, really helps too. Um, and on that note, another question, maybe our last question, maybe not, I've got a few more minutes left, was around, is it easy to get a job after graduating? And my 2 cents on this is that I think it depends on what you want. So I think sometimes maybe the disappointment comes that I've seen when people go into naturopathy, they finish their degree, they really want to just get started into clinical practice ASAP, and they assume that if they go and work in another clinic that they're just going to be handed clients and it's all just going to be smooth sailing, straight in. And I think a lot of the time that's not what happens. I think there are certain clinics or companies that may hire people where it's salary based, but more common than not, it's contract based, or you're getting like a certain split of the amount that the person is paying. And often there's a bit of a mix. Sometimes there's an agreement from the clinic that you're working at that they will bring clients to you. Sometimes, or more often, I would say it's either a mix or it's you going out and getting your own and bringing them to the clinic. And I think that's a real shock, and people can get really overwhelmed and a bit bitter about it, that it's not, that there's a whole different part around making private practice work that is very much about marketing, about business, about building relationships and drawing people in and keeping them. In saying that, that's not to deter anyone. It's more just to acknowledge that that is part of what happens, and so it's good to go in with an open mind. And then I'd also just say on that, going into private practice isn't the only thing that you can do. So you can go into education-based jobs with supplement companies, education companies, and that's probably a pretty popular avenue. And it's a bit of a mixed bag. Some of those companies love to hire new grads, and they will, and they'll, you'll just again be thrown in the deep end, and you'll learn a lot. And then some of them will want people with experience. I would just say it's a real mixed bag, and I do think you need to have some resilience and some patience and some determination in it. But I also think that doesn't mean you can't make it work. I think you just can't go in it with the assumption that it's going to fall in your lap.
I think that's a really great note to close on. And the last thing I'll say about that is just, the trouble is it's a very popular space now, and it's not that it's hard to get the jobs, but the jobs are highly coveted, and it's a matter of timing sometimes what's available at the time that you're looking for something. So I would encourage you also to be open to just getting started, and then once you're in there and you're accumulating skills and making connections and learning and developing, makes it so much easier to grow, and also you'll be more attractive to other companies if you want to try something different or move at some point in the future. So it is going to require a lot of resilience and effort in the beginning, but that I think is the hardest it ever feels. And then from there,
Yeah.
things just get easier and more fun, and more empowering and more enlightening. So yeah, I would absolutely encourage you just to keep going and get started. And from there, it should get a lot easier.
I love it. Well, on that note, hopefully we haven't scared anyone off, and that, if it's meant for you and you really are interested in it and you have a genuine passion for it, I think you absolutely have the ability to make it happen. I really genuinely believe that. And if there's any other questions that you want answered, let us know. And if there's enough of them, we'll do a part two.
Thanks for listening, friends. See you next time.